beauty of Africa lies not only in its stunning landscape and diverse wildlife, but also in the rich cultures and tradition of its people who create magic. Welcome to Just Africa, where we create magic and we discuss about Africa. My name is Swift Derito, and I'm not doing the show alone. I have the very brilliant and amazing Olumide Shokoya beside me. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Swift. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I like your tie. I always like your tie. You always look very good. Olumide, are you making a conscious effort, to look like a CEO so that, we can invest in your business?
Well, looking good is serious business, and they say you should dress the way you want to be addressed. So here I am.
So I always ask, what's that thing about you that makes you African? That when they see it, they know that, Olumide is an African.
I like my name. The pronunciation of my name, the meaning of my name, and every other thing.
Please pronounce it.
Olumide Shokoya.
Strength. All right, talking about strength, I want to tell you that Africa is home to over 1.4 billion people across 54 countries, and each with a distinct economic structure and resources and developmental changes. Yet many governments' policies are usually borrowed from our foreign counterparts, often ignoring these critical differences. Therefore, Africans, despite averaging 4% of the GDP over the last decade, and the growth has been not very even with some other African countries. While some are advancing rapidly, others are lagging behind. For example, Rwanda and Ethiopia have had sustainable growth of about 6% annually, unlike Sudan and Zimbabwe, who have kept facing economic reoccurrences and instability. Our question for today is targeted growth. Why Africa needs specialized economic blueprints, and how can we help to develop Africa? My question for you is, what do you think we need to do to develop Africa? Do you think we need a specific blueprint for the development of Africa?
Yeah, well, Africa has always been regarded as one big country, but it's a continent.
Yes.
With 54 nations. Now, some have been colonized, some are, trying to remove that colonialism. So, I think for too long we've been doing copy and paste. We look at the Western world, we like what they see, what we see, and we try and emulate it. I remember Obasanjo said at one point that we need our own form of democracy in Nigeria to operate because Nigeria itself is unique. So now, each country requires specific blueprint because of its resources, its cultural heritage, its politics, every other thing. You cannot give the same medicine to different people who are sick.
Yes.
So definitely each country needs specific blueprint. For instance, Nigeria, oil dependent and export. But yes, we are diversifying.
With agriculture.
And all that.
Yes.
If you look at Kenya, Kenya is known for technology. It's a tech hub.
Yes.
If you look at Ethiopia, Ethiopia is known for industrialization. If you look at Botswana, it's known for diamond mining and tourism. So each of them have different things. So you now have to come up with a blueprint specific for that country with the people in mind, its resources, every other thing in mind. If you look at Nigeria, for instance, now, with the new Nigeria First policy,
yes,
we are now focusing on growing our own resources, harvesting, exploiting our own resources instead of depending on others. We have always depended on export too much.
Yes.
We export crude, and we even import fuel. So, with this new administration, we are now thinking that, no, let's grow home-based products. Let's consume more of our own product.
Yes.
Let's move from raw exporting to raw mining, raw producing. That is us thinking, coming out with a blueprint for our own self. Do you understand? So I think every other country should look inwards. And that would also help us to reduce this borrowing, grants, and all that.
Yes, the fact that we are referred to as a poor nation, a third world.
Well, I don't think we are an evolving nation.
It's embarrassing. All right, talking about something new, we have a guest in the building. He's joining us via Zoom. But guess what? I'm going to take you on a quick break. And when we come back from the break, I'll be introducing my guest so that he can do justice to the topic. I am still Swift Aderito, and of course, I have Olumide Shokoya in the building. This is Just Africa. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back to Just Africa, where we talk everything about Africa, the beauty, the landscape, and of course, how Africa can be built better. My name is Swift Aderito, and I have Olumide Shokoya with me. And of course, today we have a very amazing guest, and he's going to be joining us via Skype. His name is Architect Ebiwene Bozimo, and he's a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Architecture. He is a certified project management and an IFC Edge expert for over 3 decades of experience, and he's been designing. He heads the Privatus Global Service design, project management, education, and media content production firm operating in multiple disciplines and sectors. Good morning, sir. You're welcome to Just Africa. It's fantastic having you here.
Good morning. It's great to join you, and thank you to all of your listeners. Good morning, Mr. Shokoya.
Good morning.
Okay, so Mr. Ebiwene, today we are talking about Africa, and we're asking, do you think it's important for Africa to have a specific blueprint that is tailored to individual countries and nations, that is different from those borrowed from the foreign counterparts, so that we can advance?
I'd certainly say so. I mean, if anyone has had the misfortune of trying to make a meal and putting one particular ingredient into it excessively, you know that that is not a sustainable situation. Every properly prepared meal has just the right mixture of components that make it palatable, edible, and acceptable. So the same thing goes, like Mr. Shokoya said. It's 54 individual countries with their own priorities, their own geographical locations, and their own, let's call it, economic situations and histories. And so one size could never fit all. What is, after all, an economic blueprint? It's basically a strategic outline of where a country in this our conversation, or an institution, wants to move in terms of its development, lay out its priorities, and how it intends to raise the profile of the individuals and businesses therein. So Nigeria, popularly called the giant of Africa, hasn't necessarily had the best recent economic, circumstances. We've fallen to number 4 in terms of pure GDP. In some cases, we're number 2 in terms of pricing parity. But South Africa and Egypt are dragging some of these, roles with Nigeria. I'd say across Africa, you have different countries that have different attributes. And the best way to maximize their opportunities is indeed to create tailored economic structures and blueprints for all of them. In some cases, you can have some regional solidarity, like ECOWAS or ECOIS now without the AES countries. You have the AU as a whole. And so you can get benefits when you collaborate across, regions and across the continent. But I think each country has a responsibility to create economic blueprints that extract the most efficiency from their countries individually.
Thank you very much. Now, talking about economic blueprint, what should be, what should be the core pillars of an effective country-specific economic blueprint?
Well, at the end of the day, you can only measure a blueprint by what it achieves. It's possible to just have, random growth spurts. Sometimes it's lucky, sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's a war in a part of the world, your main product, oil, may now shoot up. and then the war is settled, and your main product might drop below your benchmark pricing. No names mentioned Nigeria, but an economic blueprint at the end of the day will be seen to see what is the vision for that country as a whole. Is there a vision in Egypt, for instance? Egypt, has historical, even up to biblical, tendencies. What is the vision in a Nigeria? What is the vision in a Tanzania? That would be one of the pillars upon which you would measure or set an economic blueprint. What are the policies and where do you want to grow? Do you want to grow in your agriculture sector, which employs a huge number of people? A sector like the oil sector in Nigeria, while it accounts for a large dollar or naira number, takes very specialized people and relatively few. So if your goal is to promote as much employment as possible, you might do things that push your agriculture sector. You talked about tourism in your earlier speech. Tourism too has lots and lots of different things. You have, hospitality, you have, supplies, you have food, you have so many things. So if you take certain sectors like that, you even have cultural displays. If you take tourism and you really go into it, you can expand your economy. At least specifically, we know about Dirty December. That was quite an impressive thing there in Lagos. And if you can use that thing and go to Argungu Festival, Kano Durbar, and other places, the Calabar, what's the thing that they do in Calabar? The Carnival. If you decide that your country has, let's call it 12 important things each year you are adding to your economic, strength, then beyond today, what are you investing in? Are you investing in the people? Are you investing in infrastructure? What do those investments yield in the medium and long term? These are the kind of things you use to measure an economic blueprint. Lastly, or almost last, how are you implementing? I can tell you, because I'm a man of a certain vintage, that Nigeria has no lack, for instance, using Nigeria as an example, has no lack of economic development plans, national, international, local. We have so many of them. How efficiently and effectively do you implement these plans? That too is going to factor in how you measure that plan. Then, of course, the responsibility of the populace, the individuals, and many elected in offices and appointed, in a form for auditing, will be to monitor and evaluate those plans. Because it's one thing to come up with a plan. As an architect, I know you have the best laid plans. A blueprint is a word I'm familiar with. But sometimes those plans come across other things like COVID. How supple are you in reacting to challenges? So that too is another way you'd be assessing your economic blueprints. But at least these are some of the pillars upon which you would build your economic blueprint, very specific, very targeted, and trying to get the maximum out of that plan to work for the people.
All right.
I want us to look at two sectors or two economic blueprints that Nigeria has adapted. The first one is Nigeria First. And the second one is stopping export of raw materials, and we're moving into local production of our raw materials. Do you think that this blueprint is specific, is what we need right now in the country that would drive industrialization, create more jobs, and of course, thereby increasing the GDP of the country?
Nigeria First is, in words, it sounds good. What we have to do again to implementation, how are we showing from the policy perspective that Nigeria is indeed first? If we have a certain spend that we do every year in part of the leadership. If the leadership decides to spend on foreign items first, without first exhausting domestic sources, then it's harder to persuade the casual onlooker that indeed the spirit of Nigeria First is emanating from a positive place. But principally, Nigeria First is a fantastic idea. It has to transcend all aspects of life. We should, feature manufacturing, even in situations where perhaps we don't have the best manufacturing at first. We should invest in the training, the techniques, and the tools to make sure that over the next 6 years, the next 20 years, we can get there. Because nobody that you admire today started exactly where we are seeing them today. So as a policy, Nigeria First is a great policy. It has to be carried through, though, because I think in many cases, it sounds more like words when you compare it to the deeds. The second plan you talked about, well, remind me, you had a name for it.
Well, we're moving from raw materials export to local production of raw materials.
Exactly, exactly. Now, we have all too long just got whatever raw materials we have and sent them to other people to process, thereby creating opportunities, economic activity, and most especially jobs in those societies. Believe me, if you are, I've read somewhere where if you just get a tuber of yam, put it on a container and send it out, you get X. But if you are to actually create it into yam powder, if you are to convert it into the components that sometimes used to fill up capsules for medicine and so on, you get so much more. But most importantly, you get people in this economy active, doing things, waking up in the morning with a sense of dignity because there's somewhere that they can go to and add value. You add things like warehousing, you add things like logistics, you add things, those are all the things that can come up when you begin to process your own products. And so it is vital that we are converting mentally from just taking raw materials, starting and including oil, this is our main thing. I'm happy to say that someone in this country has decided that we will process our oil ourselves, somewhere very near you there in Lagos. His name is Dangote. We don't have to go far. He is now actually doing things to refine oil that our governments unfortunately have not done for decades, and is creating waves in European refining markets because their normal customer is no longer coming to them. Yes, he's having headwinds and everything new has its challenges, but yes, we must begin to utilize what is here and add value to it here before beginning to export it. Understand something, the Nigerian economy ordinarily is sufficient to sustain itself if we put these policies in place effectively. Then we can always export excess. We have enough people to make a large market for Nigerian domestic products. The second part of it, of course, is quality control and assurance. You cannot say just because you have the largest market, you put out products that are not world class. And so we must align with what is called best practice to make world-class products.
Thank you so much. Brilliantly said, sir. At this point, I want to ask a question. Do you think that our culture, the African culture, using Nigeria as a case study, is one of the hindrances that has affected previous blueprints that we had for economic growth? I'll give you an instance. You're an architect. You are going to put up a building in Enugu. The kind of levies you pay in Enugu is different from the kind of levies and area boys you meet in Lagos, Edo. Do you think culture, society in Africa has been a hindrance towards a successful blueprint and economic growth, sir?
I would argue that Nigerian and African cultures, undiluted, actually yielded quality results. Sometimes part of what makes some of the current appearance of culture to be deficient is a dilution of some imperatives that existed. I agree with you that it can be confusing putting up a structure in different parts of the country because you just don't know. And that is something that ordinarily could be addressed by clarity. If you put the expected, levies and all that on a website that I can access and make agreement to pay, then you take away that speed bump. But the culture of Nigeria includes naming and shaming. There are places in Edo I think the Oba of Benin has a palace of chiefs. We've all heard about the things where women repeatedly are ready when there's something offensive. Women are allegedly ready to come out half naked to make their points known. Those are strong factors ordinarily that should keep us between bounds. But we have now become more open to the outer world. We're more liberal, and there are benefits to that. I'm not saying there are no benefits to that, but I think it's important for us to take the best of our culture and then allow external factors. But bedded on a foundation of African culture, I believe you can get the very best out of us because we're not like any other people and we shouldn't keep trying or aspiring to be anybody else. We are put on the continent where it is sunny all year long. Do you know what it's like to be inside minus 50 degrees temperature in Canada and co that everybody wants to jump to? No, God has blessed us with sunshine year long. This alone should give us a cause to celebrate ourselves in our economic plans. Make sure, we always do this thing where we release the budget at the end of the year. Nigeria, just north of the equator, let me just give you an example and I'll round up. Just north of the equator experiences rainy season from, say, May, June, all the way to about October. By the time we're giving out our budget in December, we're already looking for it to be discussed up till February, March. By the time you start in March, rains have started. What if we made sure that the first working day after Independence Day, the budget must be laid? It must be discussed for the next, let's say, 1 month, and then start being effected by November 1st. Do you know that we would get the maximum amount of construction? I'm talking about construction. That's where, my heart is. If we have construction going on from November to March, April, we'll do much more with whatever small money we have than when we start construction in March, April, and rain starts affecting us in May. So you see, we should not necessarily always just copy and paste, like Shokoya said, from whatever we see elsewhere. Our own weather should guide our own priorities and timing. I'm just saying there are many other ways, and many other spheres where we can look at this, but that is one that I've thought of a lot. And I think we waste a lot of our money because we're trying to follow the January to December schedule. Our own best construction season is, say, November to April. So let's maximize this expenditure of money in that time. Listen, on the construction site, if I'm spending money by hiring pumps to pump out water, I'm wasting money that could have gone into the structure.
So shortly before we go on a break, in less than a minute, who do you think, in planning an effective blueprint, who do you think should be involved? The government, the private sector, the youth, or the civil society?
I would say we are all stakeholders, albeit we have representatives. So our representatives should come and do what they call town halls. You see, government is structured in Nigeria, federal, state, and local. And at local, you have ward leaders. A ward leader knows where there is a fence that's broken. A local government chairman knows the best way to make the road that comes to local government. A state governor knows the best way to link with the states around. So at all levels, we should have town hall meetings of the real meaningful type, and we can accumulate ideas and push them upward. And then leadership can now make priorities about what can be done now or what could be done later. And the communication pattern must be clear so that even if you had a project that's a priority for you, you understand that even if it's not being done now, it could be done next year or next 2 years. That way, the people and the leadership work in harmony.
Architect, I'm so excited and we're so happy to have you, but we need to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we continue this conversation about the blueprint to move Africa forward for economic development. Don't go anywhere, guys. This is still Just Africa, and of course, please ensure you follow us at all our social media platforms at Souk News TV, and please leave a comment so that we could put a face to the name of the people who watch us. Thank you so much. that Africa has immense potential and abundant resources. Welcome back to Just Africa, where we talk about everything African and African culture. My name is Swift Aderito, and I'm not alone in the studio. I have my co-host, the very amazing Olumide Shokoya. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
And of course, we had our resource person who has been blowing our mind. We are talking about architect Ebimo Bozena. How are you, sir? Please welcome back. And thank you for being here with us. We have enjoyed this conversation thus far.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to join you. The privilege is mine.
All right, so I want to come with a cliche question. Do you think, or people have argued, that the marginalization of women has been a problem and a challenge to the building of an effective economic system, especially because in the blueprint, a lot of women are not added. If you look at our legislative house, our senatorial house, you're looking at 1%. Political, we can count, in those days, there was a time that it was almost mandatory that your deputy governor, your VP has to be a woman. Nowadays, that has been shifted. Looking at the banking sector, we have about 11 MD CEOs, and the banking sectors are doing fantastically well. And with these women, do you think that the marginalization or the pushing women a bit aside has affected the blueprint and the building of the blueprint for future economic growth in Nigeria and Africa?
I'm very glad that before you ask this question, I made the reference to traditional cultures having the power of persuasion from women. In the traditional cultures, women are empowered. I'm an Ijaw man. The female in Ijaw land is considered highly prized, highly respected, and has her own sense of place and purpose. And that, I will argue, cuts across many of the cultures in Africa and Nigeria. In fact, we know Ghana has a matrilineal society. So my point is, this is further proof that by maybe adopting whole scale some of the things that we think we see and admire elsewhere, we might have lost a bit of the essence. Let me add, when you talk about the legislature, we say we're taking democracy ostensibly based on something like the American model. In America, women contest for and win seats on the merit of the strength of their campaigns. Are we looking for a different situation here where women are not contesting on their own merit, but are being handed seats? Why, in that instance, are we keen on changing the paradigm? I would say, for me, I have 100% confidence. My mother, rest in peace, was a professor at one of Nigeria's primary universities. My wife, my sister, my daughter, all of them have achieved. And I have never had to give them a how do I put it? Of course, we're courteous, we're chivalrous, but we're not giving them fake boost. They compete, contest, and beat men on their own ground and on their own terms. So you called it cliche question, fair enough. I'm saying I've seen too many examples of female excellence to feel that there's a deliberate marginalization. Are there programs and plans? Yes, that can be done. As a matter of fact, the world is feminine right now. Go and look at the United Nations list of special days. 99% of them are focused on women. So I would say every effort is being done right now to, if you want, address the marginalization. But the bottom line is provide the quality. Like you see in the banking sector, when women attain the top, they achieve. I would argue that right there in the studio, you are the primary host, and Mr. Shokoya is assisting you ably. You are achieving. So let's sometimes steer away from these cliches where, oh, women are being marginalized. Women perform marvelously every day in every sphere of Nigeria. In the economic blueprint, they too can perform. And I would argue that there are many banks that make specialized programs for women. I just feel that sometimes these things are overblown. My personal sentiment.
All right, thank you very much. Now, experts have also argued that for us to become more dependent on ourselves, Africans need to start trading amongst themselves. So my question goes like this. How can Africa balance regional goals like the African Continental Free Trade Area with the need for specific country-driven strategies?
Now, the AFCTA is a good framework overall for Africa. First of all, brotherly love, as simple as that. Next to you, you have an assortment of countries. How many handshakes go across our borders? Are the borders right now basically areas of strife and conflict? I say that because trading across Europe, a truck can get loaded in Belgium, drive literally seamlessly across to neighboring countries, drop off stuff, turn around and come back. The border points, they take note of who's coming through, but they are not hostile. I have gone from Nigeria through Badagry to the next 2, 3 amazing countries. I think I went all the way to the headquarters where you have EcoBank at the time. On a lighter note, what I noticed was that as soon as I passed into Benin Republic, the trees there seemed more peaceful. The palm trees on the Nigerian side looked like they were under stress. They were leaning, the wind was pressing them, the palm leaves were just, looking very scared. But by the time you enter the next countries, you see peace. You see more people riding what we call okadas. You see people at a slightly less, frantic pace. Can we shake hands across that border? Can we learn? Can we, from Badagry, put a balm of peace and calm into Lagos? On the other side, you have Cameroon. Above us, you have Niger Republic, pre-coup and all that. How easy it is. I know our former President Buhari wanted to make a train line there. That's a good initiative. But how about he connects Abuja to Itakpe, and then Itakpe, which is connected to Warri, then Warri to Port Harcourt? How about connecting us internally before we start looking outside? I am saying those African principles are great. We do need to trade with each other. Part of the problem is that we are so reliant on colonial countries. For me to go from here to Cameroon, until a few recent airlines did it, I would have to go to France and come back. What a waste of time, energy, effort, and money. For me to go to many of these other countries in Africa, you'd have to first of all go to an airline that is headquartered somewhere in Europe and come back. So we have to improve those links. Of course, there are bus lines that go through, and we have to create the sustainable security situation where those bus operators and car operators feel safe and confident. But indeed, we should also use technology. It's not every trade item that needs a physical trip. Let's invest in the technology that can let people have assurance, tokens. You're able to go online and assure yourself that the person on the other side is the identity that they purport to be, and you can safely send and receive money across currencies. So there are ways to improve that trade without even the capital investment. Invest in the technology, and that trade number will go up. Then lastly, because a lot of our economies are servicing or focused on foreign, let's call it European and Western economies, we have never seen our neighbors as some of our best trading partners. I think that's a mentality shift that has to happen so that we will now say, hey, let's invest in what it'll take to trade with Niger Republic. They're supposedly the poorest country. It can be to our mutual benefit if we trade with them in a way that increases their GDP, because they will have more money to spend in our country. Those are just some of the ways we can begin to address this localized, more domestic trade environment.
So furthermore, do you think that regional economic bodies like ECOWAS support or undermine local development priorities?
I think it's a both-and situation. It's like saying, does the federal government disturb a state? There are laws that a state can operate. Have the states operated the laws? I'll take one. When President Bola Tinubu entered, he helped promulgate a law that liberalized the electricity sector. As of this recording, only 7 states have actually taken advantage of that. What are the remaining states doing? Why are they not doing what they can do within their sphere? So when you talk about regional, OAU, ECOWAS, AU, AU can have an overall policy that enhances Africa's, economics and visibility. ECOWAS can have one that helps promote West African trade. And you, as a country, Nigeria, should do what you must do. It's not a case of either or, it's a case of both and. And so I don't think there's anything inherently in the regional bodies that stops a country from looking out for itself economically and operating maximally an effective blueprint.
Thank you so much, Architect. Still enjoying the conversation. I want to ask, do you think that the rate of borrowing or the high rate of borrowing from African countries and our dependence on loans and aids has limited our blueprints? Because when you want to have an economic blueprint, you have to put into cognizance the country you have borrowed from. For example, China. You have to make sure that their companies in Nigeria are, sitting pretty because you owe them, in quotes. I want to ask, do you think this has also been an hindrance to the smooth economic blueprints that we had in previous governments, and is still an hindrance till date?
I have an overall philosophy that borrowing in and of itself is not a negative. The question now comes, what are you borrowing for? If you are borrowing to invest in infrastructure, in training, in people that will now make them more productive members of society, that borrowing I can get behind every day. If you are borrowing to invest in yachts, in bulletproof vehicles, with or without tints, in furniture allowances, newspaper allowances, and the like, then that borrowing is for consumption. And I object to that kind of borrowing. Every time we say we're borrowing, yet for every second of the day, Nigeria ostensibly produces X barrels of oil. And that oil fetches Y naira. What are we doing with that base money first that makes us now say we need to depend on USAID to take care of our own people? We need to depend on so and so loans from IMF to take care of our own people. You know why that happens? If we use the money that we actually earn legitimately on taking care of our healthcare, our education, our infrastructure, that money would finish. Then we would now have to go to the World Bank to say, look, we need to borrow so that we can buy bulletproof jeeps for our legislators. And of course, the World Bank would say, hell no. So what we do is that we take the money that we're earning and we spend it on useless things. Yes, I said it, not Souk TV. And then when that money is finished, we now go with a shopping list of imperatives like healthcare, like education, and say, World Bank, etc., help me with so and so billions so that I can invest in healthcare. And World Bank says this is about human beings. And even though they know and they can see, because they too have Google, they put the money forth. It makes us indebted, unfortunately, and unnecessarily. So it goes back to the priority of leadership at all levels. I spoke just now about the state governors. What are they doing with their money? I'll say this just in closing. When we unified the value of the Naira, I like that because it now stopped the situation where somebody could just wake up, go and sit down in a big man's office somewhere in CBN, get an allocation of X number of dollars, and without doing any productive work, just turn on his phone and sell it at twice the cost. So right now, that's no more possible. However, for many of the state governments who had loans denominated in foreign currencies, even though they're getting more money now, they correspondingly have much higher payments to make. So be considerate and aware of that. But that all does not take away from the fact that many of those in leadership have the wrong set of priorities. And that's why they don't spend the money, such as it is that they get, on the people. Instead, they spend it on the trappings of office. Then, since you have now left the needs of the people, you now have a reason to approach, foreign lenders. We're not saying that Nigeria has all this money, and neither am I saying Nigeria is the worst debtor in the world. I'm saying if we refined our priorities, we could do with much less borrowing.
All right, thank you very much. So, furthermore, let me ask this. How do we now reduce our over-dependence on donor-driven development strategies in Africa?
You can tell before you ask the question, I utterly despise the dependence that we have. It doesn't mean we cannot link with other people. And you know, best practices means international. You will get good information from other people and learn. But it comes down to saying to yourself, in any position you are, whether in the studio there, whether where I am, or whether in a state or local government or federal office, what am I here for? There's a statement, try it as it may be. If the purpose of a thing is not known, abuse is inevitable. If the perception of why I enter office is that I will be hailed, I will have all the cars and all the houses, then abuse, what I see, is inevitable. But if I see it that when I'm in office, what a marvelous situation where I alone, by the dint of my input, can affect tens or thousands of millions of lives. What a privilege that is. Listen, I have nothing against perks. I have nothing against perks. Part of the perk of being in a high office may be one or two things. But if you focus on serving the people, then ultimately you will find that you rely less on those donor agencies because you're not going to them to take care of your healthcare. You're not going to them to put ordinary flowing water in your schools. That is maybe the minimum standard, and it's relatively inexpensive. Let me tell you something to round off. Do you know that when it comes to wiring, electrical wiring in the building sector, we rely almost solely, that's quality engineers rely almost solely on Nigeria-made wires because we have found those wires to be top quality, top notch. You can get cheaper wires from China, but a quality engineer in Nigeria will rely on Nigerian wiring. Why is that? Because the Nigerian electricity wire manufacturers have mastered best principles and are bringing out products of excellence. And well-intended, professionals use local. Similarly, let us apply those principles. Let us learn what they have done in that sector. Apply those principles to every other sector. Where are the people? Anywhere Nigerian goes to, anywhere else in the world, we're excellent. So it's not the Nigerian, it is the current Nigeria as so structured. Let us reassess what it is we stand for as a country. And even with the perks of office, we can do so much better and correspondingly borrow so much less.
Thank you so much, engineer. Architect. You talked about China, and this comes to my next question. People have also said, look, I think the educational system of Africans that we borrowed is kind of one of the things that has affected us. Looking at data, they say data is the new gold. We've come to realize that in Africa, most policies are not based on data. And this is why our foreign counterparts are doing very well. I want you to talk about data. Do you think that if we begin to educate ourselves better, especially for children, people in secondary schools, university, on data management and the importance of understanding the key things that make Africa thick and stand out, and that the economic policies form blueprints would work better?
I 100% agree. Earlier I spoke about technology. Technology and data at this point are inseparable. Indeed, I think we've all seen those viral videos where young Chinese children, 4, 3, 6 years old, are being taught to manufacture elementary things, sometimes relatively complex. Our education system was, I think, originally meant to make Nigerians serve our colonizers. We do need to take a second look and say our educational system should serve us first. This is part of the Nigeria First policy. It has to trickle into our education. What does it mean to have a Nigeria First policy? Am I trying to make myself attractive to a foreigner? And think about it. England, our former colony, has 65 million people. I'd rather be attracted to 240 million people than to 65 million people. Forget the fact that currently their economy is bigger than ours. A 240 million economy is better for me. I once had the privilege of traveling to China. When I got there, I was looking at ceiling boards, and they showed me three qualities, A, B, and C. And they said quality A is the very best quality. Quality B is so-so. And quality C, sadly, is the quality that he pointed at me, your Nigerian people come and order. The problem with quality C was that it looked good, but it was very fragile. So I asked him, question one, why do you allow your country to manufacture quality C? But that did not mean that I didn't think to myself that they have quality A that they use strictly within China. And he told me something. He said, if he dares use quality B or C inside China, 1 billion people will get to know his quality is poor and he will lose a market of 1 billion. So they only use the highest quality inside China, but they are ready to produce lower quality, lower price qualities to export. So I said, okay, your country has a problem. Stop producing bad quality. But then I looked in the mirror and said, my countrymen have a problem. Stop ordering poor quality things. Think Nigeria first and think that Nigerians deserve the highest quality as well. So there's a lot to be done on all sides, but data is what will drive that transformation. How are we educating ourselves? What are we educating ourselves about? For what purpose are we doing this education? Must all education be white collar? Should we not reinvest? And I'm happy to say that some of the policies of the government are trying to re-enable and reinvigorate, technical education. I went to school in Federal Government College, Kaduna. Opposite my school was Federal Technical College, Kaduna. And one day I had the privilege of entering their lab, and the equipment I saw there blew my mind. But I don't know whether it must exist right now. I think they should make those schools come back up. And I'd even like to go in my old age to go and learn some of the things that they were teaching them there. I would love to be able to do what they could do at that time.
Thank you very much. Final question. What examples exist of countries developing homegrown economic models, and what can we learn from them?
I would say when you hear of the Asian tigers, you know that those are countries that have simply refused to let go of their culture. They have not let go of their values. They have created modern economic principles, products, and processes firmly anchored on their sense of, morals, values, and all that. So we have a number of them in the Asian subcontinent. I'm happy that we're linking with them. Let me tell you another secret. When I I grew up watching cowboy and Indian movies, and everything American and England was the best. When I went to China and came back, maybe over 10 years ago, I've never been the same. The amount of development China has gone, it's just that we don't speak Chinese, we don't speak Mandarin. We only speak English. So we get the news from the CNNs of the world, and we think that the East is unbelievable when it comes to development. So we should really learn from the East and anchor ourselves on our own principles. We talked about them earlier in this show, and we can come up with homegrown models that are not celebrating unnecessary things, but instead celebrating what makes us uniquely African across the 54 nations in Africa. It should be a goal of every African to visit at least 1/3 of the countries in Africa. What a wonderful thing that would be. It would improve transportation, it will improve logistics, it will improve tourism, and it most importantly, improve brotherhood across our continent. So we can learn from the Asian tigers and become African cheetahs, running fast, running far.
Thank you so much, Architect Ebiwene Bosomo. We have totally enjoyed this conversation. I need you to promise that we would please want to bring you back again on the show, because I want to pick your brain a little bit more. What do you think?
I think so too.
Thank you so much, sir. Unfortunately, yes.
The privilege and pleasure were both mine. You guys have a wonderful day.
Too, sir. Have a beautiful day too, and God bless you. Olumide, what do we have to say to these things?
It's quite an eye-opener. It's quite amazing. And one of the things I took home is that when he talked about Asia and how they preserve their culture and every other thing, I think we need to start preserving that. I think we need to start, teaching other languages. I know in the Southwest, I think Yoruba and probably one other, but we need to start teaching other languages. We need to develop that. We need to preserve our culture more.
Like I always tell you, think Africa, dream African, and be Africa. So sorry we have to wrap up for today. But don't forget, Just Africa comes up from Mondays to Fridays from 8:30 to 9:30. And you can always watch every episode on Just Africa. Just go to Souk News and YouTube. Either you click the like or the videos, look for the playlist Just Africa, and watch subsequent episodes and enjoy and love on us. Olumide?
It's been a pleasure. Don't forget to follow us on all our social media pages at Souk News TV. Like, comment, and share. Until next time, I am Olumide Shokoya.
Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.